Hi guys, another video today just talking about the news in the UFC over the past week. So the first thing that I've wanted to speak about is Dana White, the UFC president, is potentially working on a super fight which doesn't involve Conor McGregor, and apparently that's only come up in the last couple of days. I don't know what this super fight could be. It could be Aspinall versus Miocic, potentially. Maybe Miocic has said that he does want to fight Aspinall now after previously saying he doesn't want to fight Aspinall and only wants John Jones. Maybe he is working on a Makachev fight. Maybe, I don't know what he's working on, to be honest. But apparently it's going to be a super fight and it doesn't involve Conor McGregor, which I think is going to be quite interesting. Potentially John Jones is coming back from his injury sooner than expected. I don't know, we'll have to wait and see what that super fight news is, and I'll talk about it as soon as we know what the super fight is. Then on to the next bit of news. Michael Venom Page, who's previously been fighting in the welterweight division in Bellator, is expected to move over to the UFC now. He's stated that him and the UFC have been flirting. And it's come out overnight that apparently his first opponent's going to be Kevin Holland in the start of the new year. Obviously two strikers, both in the welterweight division, obviously. I think Kevin Holland's he's definitely ranked in the top 15. He might just be ranked just outside the top 10. So obviously that'd be a good fight for Michael Venom Page to get into. I think he previously fought for the Bellator Championship, just come short. He's a very exciting kickboxer. He is from the UK. Him versus Kevin Holland, I think, would be quite a good fight. I don't know. I think there's quite a ability level between the UFC and Bellator. So I guess we'll have to see, because Kevin Holland's ranked just outside the top 10, I think, like I said. We'll have to see what level Michael Venom Page is at for the UFC, and whether he can potentially make a run for a UFC title. If he beats Kevin Holland, I'd like to see potentially a Stephen Wonderboy Thompson fight. If he loses, irrelevant really of his result against Shavkat Rakhmonov, which is happening in December, and I'll be doing a preview of that in a couple of weeks. Really excited for that card. The UFC 296 card, really excited for that. And then another bit of news, we've got Jalen Turner is stepping in to fight Bobby Green this weekend. Green was previously supposed to fight Dan Hooker, who beat Turner a couple of months ago. In a really back and forth fight. It was razor thin decision for Dan Hooker. Turner seemed to get tired in the later rounds of that fight, but he started really strong. I feel like Turner, he's massive for the weight, and I do think that he should move up, and I don't know how this last minute step in is really going to affect him. I don't know if it's going to be a catch weight where they fight slightly higher than the 155 pounds that they usually fight at lightweight. I think I'm just really excited for this fight. I think Green will definitely come on strong in the fight later on in the fight if Turner can't get the stoppage in the first half, up to the first half of the fight. Obviously I'll be doing a preview of it later in the week, so I'll talk about the fight more then really, but it's good to see that Bobby Green hasn't had a wasted training camp, and that he is having a fight. It's just good to see that Bobby Green hasn't wasted his money on the training camp, and that he's getting a fight. I think Jalen Turner's higher in the rankings than Green, so if Green wins, he'd obviously move up in the rankings. I would like to see Green versus Hooker still if Green wins. Although Paddy Pimblett, he's said that he wants to fight Green if he beats Tony Ferguson, which is also on the UFC 296 card in December, and I'll be talking about that fight in the future in a couple of weeks. He said that he doesn't think the fight against Ferguson will get him a ranking, but he wants to fight Green to get a ranking afterwards. I think Green's ranked just outside the top 10, I think 12, 13, something like that. I don't think beating Tony Ferguson would get Paddy Pimblett a ranking, although I think it depends on how he beats Tony Ferguson. If he goes out there, submits him or knocks him out in the first round, I could see potentially a 15 ranking. But because Tony Ferguson's been on, I think it's a 6-fight losing streak, I can't see him getting a ranking. And I think Ferguson will be a big test for Paddy Pimblett, to be honest with you, because I don't rate Paddy Pimblett that highly, and I think Ferguson's losing streak has been quite misleading. I'll speak about it in a couple of weeks when I'm doing the preview for it. But Pimblett wanting Green, I could see that potentially if Green loses. I don't think it would happen if Green wins against Turner. I think they'll try and do the hooker fight still, but I think it depends on how much the UFC want to push Paddy Pimblett, really. They've been trying to push him I wouldn't say quite quick, but they've been trying to push him quite a lot over the last 2 years since he signed for the UFC. He's been quite underwhelming, but I guess we'll see what happens, really. We've got to see if he can get past Tony Ferguson to start off with, but I don't think he will be fighting Bobby Green unless Bobby Green loses to Jalen Turner. Then the next bit of news is Joe Pyfer is going to be fighting Jack Hermansson. Joe Pyfer came off the Contender Series, I think in 2021 or 2022. He's come off the Contender Series. Dana White's given him a big push. He's had quite a difficult upbringing. He's now fighting Jack Hermansson. I would have liked to have seen someone else get the push, to be honest with you. Nothing against Joe Pyfer getting the push. But Jack Hermansson, I think, is 10th ranked. I think Aliskerov, who's another surgeon middleweight, has had the better performances than Pyfer, so I would have potentially liked to have even seen them match together, or Aliskerov get the fight against Hermansson. But there's rumours that he might be fighting another ranked contender next year, in the early part of next year. But yeah, I'm happy for Joe Pyfer. If with a win, he can get ranked potentially in the top 10, maybe just outside the top 10. I'd like to see some contenders get pushed quite quickly in their career if they're good enough. I think Joe Pyfer is good enough. So that's in the early part of next year. I'd like to see that fight. It would be a good test for Joe Pyfer to see where he really is in his career, see if he could potentially become a title challenger. The middleweight division is obviously quite interesting at the moment, with Adesanya previously being the champion, everybody thinking Adesanya's the best, and then he goes and loses to Sean Strickland, who people didn't really give much of a chance to. And then he's saying now that he's not going to fight until 2027, which I think he'll probably fight before that, maybe end of 2024, maybe 2025, potentially, so he can have a year off. I think, he puts himself into title contention with a win against Hermansson. There's obviously Brendan Allen, who got a win a couple of weeks ago. He'll be on the card. He'll be trying to get in a title fight as well. There's obviously Jared Cannonier, Paulo Costa, Hamzat Chimaev, Joe Pyfer if he wins against Hermansson. There's Robert Whittaker, and obviously the title fight between Sean Strickland and Dricus du Plessis in January. That is, I think that's in Canada. Exciting times for middleweight division, where I think it's got a bit, I wouldn't say flat, because it's not really the right word, but Adesanya was going through quite a lot of contenders quite easily, but then the upset loss over Sean Strickland, it's just made the middleweight division very interesting now. Then we've got Makachev, Islam Makachev, who last fought in October against Alexander Volkanovski. Knocked him out in the first round. Volkanovski came in on short notice, but still amazing win, amazing head kick knockout by Makachev. Looked very scary in that fight. He looks definitely the best lightweight, I'd say. Potentially pound for pound number one. Potentially soon I'll be doing videos on pound for pound top 10s in boxing and UFC and giving my opinion on it. But apparently he wants 3 fights in 2024. I think that'll be quite difficult to do because of Ramadan. That happens, I think, March, April time. All the main events of the pay-per-view cards are booked up until then. Apparently he wanted to fight 3 times this year but couldn't because the UFC kept booking events without him apparently. The first 3 main events of the year are already booked up till March, so it's Strickland, Duplessis in January. Then you've got sorry, my mind's gone blank. You've got Volkanovski, Ilia Topuria, which is a very good fight and I'll be looking forward to that one. And then you've got, who's the last one? You've got Sean O'Malley against Marlon Chito Vera. So I don't see Makachev getting on one of those cards. He definitely won't be on the undercard of one of those cards. He'll have to be the headliner. Potentially he could be a headliner over Volkanovski, but that's a big fight, so I don't know if they'd want to do 2 lots of pay-per-view points to the UFC, because every time there's a title, the champion would get pay-per-view points. So I don't think they'd want to give more than what they have to be honest. If he fights middle of the year, so straight after Ramadan gets into a training camp, he could fight probably June, July. Then if he fights September, October, well, he'd definitely be fighting in October on that card. Then he would have to squeeze one in December, but he'd need to get quick finishes in those fights or come out without any damage. I don't think he's going to get 3 fights in this year, to be honest with you. I think he's going to be quite an inactive champion. Not his fault, apparently he wants to fight those 3 times, like Khabib was, I think, because he only fought, after he got the title, he only fought McGregor, and then the next year he fought Poirier, and then the next year he was supposed to fight Tony Ferguson, but obviously that fight fell out due to COVID, and then he fought Justin Gaethje, so he only fought like 3 times in 3 years, roughly. Ally Quinta might have been the same year as McGregor, actually, so maybe he's fought 4 times in 3 years. So I think he might be a bit like that, and that's not his fault. It's because of his religion. It's because obviously he can't fight during Ramadan, where he needs to really get a fight in. He's always going to fight in like October cards, so he needs to really get a fight in around Ramadan time, so it's very hit and miss whether he's going to get that if he wants to fight 3 times a year. But as I've said, I don't think he's going to fight 3 times in 2024. Speaking of that October card, there's obviously Magomed Ankalaev and Johnny Walker got called off because Ankalaev need Johnny Walker in the face when he was a downed opponent, which is obviously illegal in MMA. That's going to be scheduled, I think, for January 13th, I think I saw. That's going to be a headliner January 13th. That fight was turning into quite a decent fight, to be fair. I thought Ankalaev was just going to be able to take Johnny Walker down, but he tried to have a bit of a stand-up fight with him, which is always Johnny Walker can always land something. He's a very awkward fighter. He can land something a spinning attack. You don't really see something coming. That's a good fight. I'm looking forward to that one. And then the last bit of news over this week, Erin Blanchfield, who's a female flyweight, She expects to fight Manon Fiorot because Alexa Grasso and Valentina Shevchenko are probably going to have their trilogy at some point. Blanchfield was expected to fight. She's expected to fight Shevchenko early in the year after Shevchenko was supposed to get past Alexa Grasso. Then Alexa Grasso beat Shevchenko and they had a rematch because of how dominant Valentina Shevchenko was as a champion. That ended in a draw. Blanchfield had a fight against Talia Santos, I think. She had that fight on the Singapore card, I believe, which was in September. That was in September. She won that fight, obviously. So she's expected to fight the winner of Grasso and Shevchenko, but that ended in a draw, so they've got to have a trilogy now. So Blanchfield thinks that she's going to get paired against Manon Fiorot, who beat Rose Namajunas in early September as well. Rose Namajunas moving up in weight. I think that'd be a good fight, good clash of styles. Manon Fiorot is more of a stand-up fighter. Blanchfield can stand up and fight, but she prefers to take her opponents down. I think that'd be a good fight, potentially for the interim belt, she said. I think that'd be a good fight, and if it gets made, I'll definitely do a preview on it. Thanks guys for listening.